He was stabbed 5 times by the Apache woman, and when he awoke, 3 Apache were watching him. He had been walking since sunrise, following a narrow trail that barely deserved to be called a path. The land around him was wide and quiet, stretching farther than he could see. Dry grass brushed against his boots and small stones pressed through the thin soles. The air felt heavy, even though the sky was clear. Every step made him more tired, but stopping felt more dangerous than moving forward. He was not a brave man. He had never thought of himself that way. He was just someone who had run out of choices. Back home, work had disappeared, debts had grown, and people who once smiled at him now turned their faces away. When he heard there was opportunity beyond the hills, he believed it. He packed what little he owned and started walking, telling himself that hard land was better than no land at all. The map he carried was old and torn. Some markings were faded, and others looked like guesses more than facts. He trusted it anyway, because trusting something felt better than trusting nothing. What the map did not show were the invisible lines drawn by people who had lived on this land long before him. Lines that were not written in ink, but remembered in blood, loss, and survival. As the sun climbed higher, his mouth grew dry. He stopped near a rock and drank the last of his water. He tried not to panic when the bottle became empty. He told himself he would find a stream soon, or at least shade. Hope, even weak hope, pushed him forward. The land felt different as the hours passed. The silence grew thicker. Birds no longer crossed the sky. Even the wind seemed careful, as if it did not want to make a sound. He felt it then, the feeling of being watched. At first he laughed at himself. Fear plays tricks on tired minds, he thought, but the feeling did not go away. It stayed, pressing against his back, crawling up his neck. He turned suddenly, expecting to see nothing. And he did see nothing, just rocks, trees, and long shadows. Still, his heart beat faster. He remembered stories people used to tell, stories about travelers who vanished, about land that did not forgive mistakes. He had never taken those stories seriously. Now, they felt uncomfortably close. He tried to move faster, but his legs protested. Blisters burned and his breath came in short pulls. The sun began to sink, turning the sky orange and red. Night in this place would be cold and dangerous. He knew that. He searched for a place to rest, somewhere hidden, somewhere safe. He found a small hollow near a cluster of trees. It was not much, but it offered some cover. He sat down, rubbing his aching feet. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to think about turning back, but back felt just as far as forward. And forward at least held the promise of something new. As darkness fell, sounds returned, but not the comforting kind. A branch snapped somewhere in the distance, then another. He froze, holding his breath. Animals moved at night, he knew that, but this felt different. These sounds were careful, measured, intentional. His hand moved slowly to the small knife he carried. It was not meant for fighting, just a tool. He knew it would be useless if trouble came. His chest tightened as he realized how foolish he had been to walk alone into land he did not understand. Time passed strangely after that. Minutes felt like hours. His eyes struggled to adjust to the dark. Every shadow looked like a threat. He wondered if anyone back home would notice if he never returned. The thought hurt more than he expected. Then he saw her. She stepped out from behind a tree as if she had always been there. The firelight from the small flame he had made flickered across her face. She was strong, steady, and silent. Her eyes were sharp, focused, and filled with something he could not name. Not anger exactly, not fear either, something older, something firm. He stood quickly, raising his empty hands to show he meant no harm. His mouth opened, but no words came out. What could he say? Sorry for being here, sorry for not knowing. The silence swallowed his thoughts before they could form. She did not move closer. She did not step back. She simply watched him as if weighing his existence. In that moment, he felt smaller than he ever had in his life. not because she was powerful, but because he realized how little his intentions mattered here. He noticed the way she stood, balanced and ready. This was not someone surprised by him. This was someone who had been aware long before he knew he was seen. The land, the silence, the watching eyes, it all made sense now. He tried again to speak, his voice shaking. He said he was lost. He said he meant no trouble. The words sounded weak, even to his own ears. He did not know if she understood his language, but he hoped his tone carried the truth. For a brief moment, something passed across her face. Not softness, but thought. Memory, perhaps. He wondered how many men had stood where he stood now, saying similar words, making similar claims. The air felt tight, like it might break. He took one slow step back, careful not to threaten her. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure she could hear it. He wished he could explain everything, his hunger, his fear, his ignorance. But explanations felt useless here. He noticed movement beyond her, just at the edge of the firelight. Shadows that did not belong to trees. His breath caught. He was not alone with her. That knowledge settled heavily in his chest. She raised her hand slightly, not as a signal of peace, not as a threat either, just a motion that meant something important was about to happen. He felt it deep inside, a warning without words. He thought of running. The idea flashed through his mind like lightning, but his legs refused to move. Running would only prove what they might already believe, that he was dangerous, that he did not respect the land or its people. So he stood there, exposed and trembling, under a sky full of stars that felt far away and uncaring. The fire crackled softly, the only sound between them. In that moment, he understood something that would stay with him forever. Crossing land without understanding its people was not just a mistake, it was a kind of blindness. And blindness, he realized too late, could cost more than sight. The woman took a step forward, and with that single movement, the fragile balance of his world began to collapse. The moment she stepped forward, everything happened faster than his thoughts. He did not even have time to raise his hands again. 1 second he was standing near the fire, breathing hard, and the next his balance was gone. A sharp pain spread through his body, sudden and shocking, like his breath had been knocked out of him from the inside. He stumbled back, confused more than hurt at first. His mind tried to understand what was happening, but fear drowned out reason. He felt another strike, then another. Each one came quick and controlled, not wild or angry. There was no shouting, no struggle, no long fight. It was over before he could truly react. He fell to his knees, the ground cold beneath him. The stars above seemed to spin slowly, as if the sky itself had lost its place. His hands shook as he tried to press them against his body, trying to stop what he did not fully understand yet. Pain came in waves now, strong, deep, and heavy, but still strangely distant. He looked up once more and saw her face. It was calm, not cruel, not pleased, just firm, like someone completing a task they had done before. For a brief second their eyes met. In that look he did not see hatred. What he saw instead frightened him more, certainty. His strength faded quickly after that. His arms gave way and he fell forward onto the dirt. The smell of earth filled his nose. The firelight flickered at the edge of his vision, growing dimmer with each breath. His thoughts began to drift. Sounds faded in and out, like waves pulling away from the shore. He remembered small things then. His mother's voice calling him in for dinner when he was a boy, the sound of rain against a metal roof, the feeling of hope he had carried when he first started this journey. Those memories felt warmer than the cold ground beneath him. He wondered if this was how it ended, not with a great moment, not with meaning or explanation, just a quiet mistake made in the wrong place. He expected darkness to come all at once, but it didn't. It crept in slowly, like sleep that refused to fully take him. Somewhere far away he sensed movement. Hands, maybe. Voices, though he could not understand them. He tried to speak, to ask for help, but his mouth would not respond. Then there was nothing. Time passed, though he had no way of knowing how much. It could have been minutes or hours. His body lay still, caught between waking and nothingness. At times he felt pressure, then relief, warmth, then cold. His mind floated in strange places, half-dreams filled with broken images. He dreamed he was walking again, but this time the land did not resist him. The ground was soft, the air gentle. He followed a river that seemed to glow under the moonlight. Every step felt lighter than the last. A part of him wanted to stay there forever, but something pulled him back. Pain returned slowly, not sharp like before, but deep and aching. It wrapped around him, heavy and impossible to ignore. His chest rose with effort, each breath a small victory. He felt something tight around his body, cloth, bindings, maybe hands that had worked carefully while he was gone. He did not open his eyes yet. Fear held them shut. He did not know where he was or who might be near him. His mind searched for the last clear memory, and when it found it, his heart began to race again. The woman, the fire, the certainty in her eyes, why was he still breathing? That question echoed again and again inside him. He had been sure he was left to die. The pain told him he was not whole, not safe, but alive all the same. Confusion pressed down on him harder than fear. He tried to move his fingers. They responded slowly, weakly, but they moved. That small success filled him with a strange mix of relief and terror. If he was alive, then something had been decided for him, and he did not know what that decision was. Memories returned in fragments. The sound of footsteps near him after he fell, shadows passing over his fading vision. A sense of being lifted, carried, or dragged gently across the ground. At the time, he thought it was another dream. Now it felt more real. His throat was dry, painfully so. He tried to swallow, but it hurt. Still, he forced himself to take shallow breaths, counting them to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. He had learned that much in his life. He thought about the stories again. Stories of people who crossed into places they did not belong. Some were never seen again. Others returned changed, quieter, careful with their words. He had laughed at those stories once. Now he wondered which kind of ending waited for him, if any ending waited at all. The air around him smelled different than before. Less like smoke and dirt, more like plants and clean water. That alone told him he was no longer where he had fallen. Someone had moved him. Someone had chosen not to let him die where he lay. That thought stayed with him. Why keep him alive? He searched his memory for something he might have done wrong, something that marked him as dangerous. But there was nothing. He was just a tired man who did not understand the land, a man who walked too far and asked too little. His thoughts slowed again, exhaustion pulling him back toward sleep. This time he did not fight it. His body needed rest, even if his mind screamed warnings. As his awareness faded, one feeling stayed strong. He was not alone anymore. And that frightened him more than dying alone ever had. Before he slipped away completely, he sensed quiet movement nearby, the soft shift of weight, the presence of others watching, waiting. He could not see them, but he felt them, like the land itself was holding its breath. Whatever fate he had expected for himself was no longer his to choose. Darkness took him again, deeper this time, carrying him toward a morning he never believed he would see. He returned to the world slowly, as if climbing out of deep water. At first there was only sound, a low crackling, steady and calm. Then came warmth on his skin, not sharp like pain but gentle, spreading through him. His body felt heavy, like it did not belong to him anymore. He tried to open his eyes, but they would not listen. Fear rushed in at once. His mind was awake, but his body lagged behind, slow and weak. He focused on breathing, one breath at a time, careful not to move too much. Every breath reminded him that he was still alive, and that confused him deeply. When his eyes finally opened, light rushed in, making him blink again and again. The world came into focus slowly. He was lying on the ground, but not on bare dirt. Something soft had been placed beneath him, thick cloths or woven mats. Above him, branches formed a rough shelter, blocking the harsh sun and letting only gentle light through. Then he saw them. 3 men stood a short distance away, facing him. They were quiet, still, and watching him closely. None of them spoke. None of them smiled. Their faces showed no clear emotion, only attention. It was not the look of anger or cruelty. It was the look of people deciding what something was worth. His heart began to race. Panic rose in his chest, but his body could not act on it. He tried to sit up and failed. Pain flared, sharp enough to steal his breath. One of the men shifted slightly, not stepping closer but clearly aware of his movement. The man swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry, his tongue thick. He wanted to ask where he was. He wanted to ask why he was alive. He wanted to ask what would happen next, but his voice came out as nothing more than a weak sound, barely louder than air. One of the men spoke then, not in a language he understood, but the tone was calm, measured. There was no shouting, no threat in the sound. Still, his fear did not ease. Not knowing what was being said made everything worse. He turned his head slightly and noticed the careful wrapping around his body. Cloths were tied firmly, cleanly, as if someone had taken time and care. That detail struck him hard. Someone had worked to keep him alive. Someone had chosen to treat him, not abandon him. That thought sat heavily in his mind. Why? He closed his eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to steady himself. When he opened them again, the 3 men were still there, unmoving, watching. One of them stepped forward just enough to be seen more clearly. He was older than the others, his face marked by time and sun. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the man's level but still keeping distance. The older man held up a hand, palm open. It was not a threat. It was not exactly comfort either. It felt like a warning wrapped in calm. Stay still. Stay quiet. The man nodded slowly, even though he was not sure if the gesture meant anything to them. He hoped it did. His body trembled, not just from pain, but from the weight of not knowing his place here. Minutes passed in silence, or maybe longer. Time felt strange. The world had shrunk to the fire nearby, the shelter above, and the eyes watching him. His thoughts drifted to the woman again. He had not seen her yet. The memory of her face, steady and certain, returned clearly. She was the reason he was here like this, alive but completely powerless. He did not know if that made her his enemy or something else entirely. The wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere close, water flowed. The sound was steady and calm, almost peaceful. It did not match the storm inside his chest. One of the men stepped away and returned with a small container. He knelt and held it near the man's lips. The man hesitated only a second before accepting. His thirst was stronger than his fear. The water was cool and clean, and he drank slowly, careful not to choke. That simple act, being given water, changed something inside him. It did not remove the fear, but it softened the edge. These people could have let him die. They did not. That mattered. After drinking, he lay back again, exhausted. His strength was gone, drained by pain and confusion. The men returned to their positions, silent once more. As the day passed, he drifted in and out of shallow sleep. Each time he woke, someone was nearby. Always watching, always quiet. He was never alone, not even for a moment. He noticed small details then. The way they moved carefully, never rushing. The way they respected the space around him, not touching unless necessary. The way they spoke to each other softly with purpose. This was not cruelty, it was control. And control, he realized, could be just as frightening. At one point, he heard footsteps that were lighter than the others. He opened his eyes and saw her standing at the edge of the shelter. The woman. She did not come closer. She did not look away. She simply watched him the same way she had before, only now there was something else there. Not anger, recognition. Their eyes met and his chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain everything again, but no words came. Instead, he held her gaze and let whatever truth he had show in his eyes, fear, regret, and a quiet understanding that he had crossed a line he did not know existed. She turned and left without a word. That moment stayed with him long after she was gone. As evening approached, the light softened, the air cooled. Food was placed near him, simple, warm, and carefully prepared. He ate slowly, grateful and cautious. No one spoke. No one rushed him. He began to understand something important then. This was not a prison in the way he imagined prisons. There were no chains, no harsh treatment, but he was not free. Every breath he took was allowed, not owned. That truth settled deep inside him. He was alive because they chose him to be. What that choice meant, he did not yet know. As night came and the stars appeared, he lay awake, staring upward through the shelter. Pain still lived in his body, but it was no longer the loudest thing. The loudest thing was the waiting. Tomorrow, something would change. He felt it. Decisions like this were not left hanging forever. Surrounded by strangers, bound by kindness he did not understand, he faced the hardest truth of all. His journey had ended the moment he stepped onto land that was not his to cross. Whatever came next would shape the rest of his life, and he had no control over it at all. The days that followed were slow and careful. He remained lying on the soft mats, his body weak, his muscles stiff from the wounds that had been stitched or bandaged by hands he could not understand. At first, he could not eat much. Pain made even the simplest movements exhausting. Every time he tried to sit up, a sharp ache reminded him how close he had come to death. But slowly, with patience from the 3 men who watched him, he began to regain strength. He noticed small routines forming around him. Every morning, one of the men brought water, clean and cool, letting him drink before even speaking. The older man, who seemed the leader, would glance at him carefully, making sure he was improving but never forcing anything. Food came at noon and evening, simple meals prepared with care. They never rushed him. They never asked him to do anything. Their attention was steady, silent, and precise. He tried to piece together why he was still alive. He had expected to be left to die after the attack. The thought that someone might have chosen to keep him alive instead of letting nature take its course was new and confusing. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to apologize for crossing into their land, but every time he tried to speak, the words caught in his throat. Fear made him silent and the language barrier made him hesitant. Then, one evening, the woman returned. She stepped into the soft firelight, quiet as a shadow. She did not approach him, did not speak, but the moment he saw her, he realized she was the reason he had survived. Her movements were calm, controlled, not cruel, not vengeful, just firm, deliberate, like someone completing a task that had been planned carefully. He remembered the 5 stabs. Each had been precise, not random. They were meant to stop him, not to punish him unnecessarily. He realized then that she had acted not from anger but from duty. There was a reason he had been stabbed, a reason he had been spared. That thought made him shiver. Survival, he now understood, was not always about courage or strength. It was about understanding the rules of a world that he had ignored. Days passed, and he slowly began to move more. His muscles were sore, but he could sit and then stand with assistance. One of the men guided him carefully, showing him gestures for balance and safety. His mind absorbed every action. Every movement of theirs, every small decision, taught him more than words ever could. They were not cruel, but they were deliberate. Every action carried meaning, lessons he had to observe rather than be told. He noticed their bond with the land. Every step they took seemed measured, every glance placed with care. The fire was small, controlled. The plants near their camp were left untouched. He began to understand that the violence he had faced had not been reckless. It had been a warning, a lesson, and a way to preserve balance. The land belonged to them in ways he could not yet comprehend. The woman returned again one afternoon. This time she brought something, a small bundle of cloth and food placed near him carefully. She did not speak, but her eyes held something deeper, understanding perhaps, or a warning. He realized she was watching him not as an enemy, but as someone testing him, observing whether he could survive in this place without causing more harm. Slowly he began to understand their language of actions. Food meant care, not weakness. The way they moved, always quiet, meant respect for each other and the land. Silence was not emptiness, it was communication. The more he watched, the more he learned. Fear gradually became understanding, confusion became careful attention, and uncertainty began to shift toward cautious respect. He started to notice their patience. Nothing was forced. No punishment was repeated. They allowed him to heal at his own pace. He realized this was another lesson. Mercy was given, but it required recognition. If he made a mistake again, there would be consequences. Survival here demanded not only caution, but humility. One evening, after he had managed to walk a short distance on his own, the woman approached the edge of the firelight. She stood silently for a long time, watching him. His chest tightened. He had no words, but his eyes tried to convey apology, gratitude, and understanding. She nodded slightly, a small gesture, almost imperceptible. That small acknowledgement felt larger than anything he had ever received from strangers. The three men continued their quiet observation. He could feel their presence even when he could not see them clearly. Each day he became stronger, more aware, more careful. Every movement, every glance, every moment was a lesson. He began to feel that he had been given something far more important than life. He had been given the chance to understand the world as it truly was, not as he had assumed it to be. He thought of home, of the life he had left behind. The debts, the struggles, the people who had ignored him, they all felt distant now. In this place, alive but powerless, he was learning something vital. Life was fragile, and survival depended not just on strength or cleverness, but on respect and awareness. The woman visited again at dawn one morning, bringing water and food. She watched him as he ate, her gaze steady. He realized she was not only observing him, but guiding him in a silent way. Each small act, each gesture carried meaning. He had survived because she had chosen to act, and now he was learning because she continued to act. Over time, he started to recognize small patterns. He could anticipate when someone would come to check on him, when the fire would be tended, when food would appear. He began to understand the rhythms of their world. That understanding brought him a strange kind of calm. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He was a man learning. He wanted to ask questions, but the words were difficult. He could only watch and listen, trying to understand through gestures, expressions, and actions. Patience became his teacher. Observing became his way of communication. He learned that in this world, silence was more powerful than words. One evening, he walked a short distance outside the shelter with the guidance of the older man. The air was cool, and the stars above felt closer than he had ever noticed. For the first time, he could see the land as they saw it, not hostile, not indifferent, but alive. Every tree, every rock, every shadow carried meaning. He began to understand why they protected this place so fiercely. The woman watched from a distance, silent and still. She did not speak, but her presence was commanding. He realized she had not spared him only for his life, but to teach him something about this land, about respect, and about choices. Every action she had taken was deliberate, every moment a lesson. Days turned into nights and nights into days. He slowly grew stronger, able to sit, stand, and move with greater ease. His wounds healed and his mind cleared. Yet he knew he had been changed forever. The fear he had first felt remained, but it was now accompanied by understanding, humility, and cautious respect. He realized that the choice to keep him alive had been theirs alone. He had no power here. Survival depended entirely on them. That truth weighed heavily on him, but alongside the fear, he felt gratitude. Not for life alone, but for the chance to understand, to learn, and to see the world from a perspective he had never imagined. By the end of the week, he was able to walk steadily and manage basic tasks. The three men observed him carefully, always present, always silent. The woman continued her visits, each time watching, each time teaching without words. He understood finally that he had been spared for a reason, not anger, not revenge, not punishment, but instruction. He was learning the rules of a world he had ignored, the boundaries he had crossed unknowingly, and the value of respect for those who protected it. Every glance, every gesture, every movement around him carried a lesson. And he knew that when he left this place, he would carry those lessons with him forever. The land had spared him, the woman had spared him, and the men had spared him. Life had given him a second chance, but it was his responsibility to honor it. He lay back on the mats one evening, looking at the fire flickering in the quiet night. For the first time, he felt a sense of peace. The pain of his wounds remained, but it was softer now. The fear had not vanished, but it had been joined by understanding. And deep inside, he realized that he had survived not because he was strong, but because he had been given a chance to learn what true strength and respect meant. In the stillness, he whispered a silent promise, to never forget, to never take life or land for granted, and to honor the hands that had saved him without expecting anything in return. And somewhere in the shadows, he felt the woman's quiet acknowledgement, as if she had heard him even without words. He was alive, and he had begun to understand why. By the time the fifth day arrived, he had recovered enough to move without help, though every step still reminded him of the pain he had endured. His body felt different, heavier in some places, lighter in others, and the memory of the stabs lingered like small echoes of a storm long past. He realized that survival was not just physical, it lived in the mind as well. He had been forced to face fear, helplessness, and dependence, and in doing so, he had learned lessons he would carry forever. That morning, the air was cooler than usual. The sun had just begun to rise over the hills, painting the landscape in soft gold and pink. Birds moved quietly across the sky, their wings barely brushing the morning air. He watched them for a moment, feeling a strange peace he had not felt since the moment he first entered this land. Yet beneath the calm, a tight knot of tension remained in his chest. He knew today would be the day he left. The woman appeared at the edge of the shelter, as she had done so many times before. She did not speak, but her presence was firm and undeniable. He understood without a single word that she had come to watch him one last time. Slowly he rose to his feet. His legs wobbled slightly, but he did not fall. He felt the strength returning, the careful endurance of days spent healing and learning. The three men observed silently, maintaining the same steady patience they had shown from the beginning. There was no smile, no overt acknowledgement, only quiet attention. The man felt a mixture of relief and apprehension, relief that he had survived, and apprehension because he did not know what their final decision would be. Their silence held a weight that was heavier than any blade. He stepped forward slowly, careful with every movement. The ground beneath his feet felt different, softer, alive, yet dangerous if disrespected. He remembered every lesson he had learned: patience, observation, respect for space, and the importance of understanding actions over words. Each step reminded him of how fragile life could be when you did not respect the rules of the land. The woman did not move. She only watched, her eyes calm but alert. He noticed for the first time the way she carried herself, not aggressive, not threatening, but powerful in a way that demanded attention without forcing it. He understood now that the stabs had not been acts of cruelty, but of precision, designed to teach him about boundaries, respect, and the consequences of ignorance. He stopped at a safe distance and lowered his gaze slightly, a gesture of humility he hoped they would understand. The older man took a step forward, gesturing toward the path that led out of their land. The man nodded, understanding without words that he was being given the chance to leave. It was a gift he had not earned through strength, but through patience, respect, and a willingness to learn. Before taking his first step on the path, he looked back at the three men and the woman. His eyes held gratitude, apology, and recognition of the lessons they had imparted without speaking. He realized he could not repay them, could not fully explain the depth of his understanding, but he could honor their actions by carrying the lessons forward. He would never forget the precise care with which they had healed him, the patience they had shown, and the power they held without needing to use it recklessly. The path ahead was narrow and winding, leading through hills, rocks, and sparse trees. Each step felt heavy with meaning. He moved carefully, making sure to respect the land as he had been taught, aware that he was an outsider who had been allowed to leave rather than face death. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the crunch of his boots on stones, reminded him of the delicate balance he had disrupted and now had the chance to honor. As he walked, he thought about the lessons of the past days. He understood that life was fragile, and survival depended not on strength alone, but on respect, awareness, and patience. The fear he had felt at first had transformed into something stronger, humility and gratitude. He realized that the choice to let him live had been theirs, and he would carry that responsibility with him forever. The woman and the men remained at the edge of the firelight, watching until he was almost out of sight. He turned briefly, offering one last silent acknowledgement. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture not of command or warning, but of recognition. It was the only farewell he received, yet it carried more weight than words could ever convey. As the path stretched ahead, the man reflected on the changes within himself. He had entered this land full of ignorance and desperation, guided only by hope and a torn map. He left carrying understanding, awareness, and a profound respect for life, and the people who had shown him mercy. The stabs that had nearly ended him were now etched in his memory not as punishment, but as a lesson in precision, respect, and the seriousness of boundaries. The journey back home was slow. Each hill climbed, each stone navigated, reminded him of the balance between courage and humility. He thought about the people he had left behind, the life he had paused to risk, and how different he now felt from the man who had first stepped onto this land. Fear had shaped him, and survival had matured him. When he finally saw familiar hills in the distance, a sense of completion washed over him. He was exhausted, battered, and changed in ways that were not visible on the surface. Yet inside, he carried the strength of experience, a quiet understanding of life's fragility, and the lessons of respect and patience imparted without a single spoken word. He paused one last time before leaving the boundaries of the land. The silence was profound, filled with memory and recognition. He understood that the mercy shown to him was not something to forget. It was a gift that required acknowledgement through actions, not words. He whispered a silent promise to honor it, to live carefully, to respect others, and to remember the lessons taught by hands that had saved him when no one else would. As he walked away, he felt lighter in body but heavier in mind. The land, the woman, and the three men had changed him forever. He understood now that survival was not about escaping danger alone. It was about understanding, learning, and carrying forward the lessons given by those who held power and chose mercy over violence. By the time the first village came into view, he was no longer just a traveler seeking a path. He was a man transformed by experience, humbled by the fragility of life, and forever aware of the strength and patience of those who had saved him. Every step forward was a tribute to them, and every breath he took reminded him of the life he had been allowed to keep. He would carry this story silently, a private understanding of mercy, strength, and respect. He would never forget the hands that had healed him, the eyes that had watched him, and the lessons that had been given without words. The journey had ended, but its impact would last forever. Life had given him a second chance, and he knew he would honor it, walking carefully, respectfully, and humbly through every day that remained. The land faded behind him, the fire and the silent watchers disappearing into memory. Yet in his mind and heart, they were never gone. The woman, the three men, the lessons. They were part of him now, inseparable from the man who had crossed into danger unknowing, and emerged alive, changed and aware of the value of life, patience, and respect. With each step toward the life he once knew, he felt gratitude, fear, and humility woven together. He had survived not by chance, not by strength alone, but because mercy had been chosen for him, and he carried that gift with him into the world, knowing it would guide him for the rest of his life.